After months of criticism and two significant scandals, Sir Keir Starmer has resigned as British Prime Minister. So why is the country on the precipice of voting in a seventh Prime Minister in only 10 years? I'm Samantha Selinger-Morris, and you're listening to the Morning Edition from The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald. Today, Europe correspondent David Crowe on Keir Starmer's drastic fall and on Andy Burnham, the unconventional politician who's expected to take his place. David Crowe, welcome back to the podcast.
It's so good to be back on the podcast. Sam, good to talk to you.
We are so lucky you're there because as we are recording this on Tuesday morning Australian time, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, of course, has announced his resignation to make way for a new leader of the Labour Party. So why has he resigned? What happened? Because Keir Starmer won an election landslide only 2 years ago.
Yes, it is quite amazing. The thing is that the spill has been happening in slow motion here for so long. Even though they won in a landslide 2 years ago, the last year has been characterised by incessant complaining about Keir Starmer, and that comes down to a couple of factors. His performance has not been good. He is not a natural politician. He hasn't been great at it, and voters are fed up with him. He's got poor polling. He was just incredibly unpopular, and that's been happening for a while. 69% unfavourable in terms of voter responses on Keir Starmer, 23% favourable. That's a net negative 46%. So that's quite astonishing. I mean, all politicians here are disliked generally in those results, but his levels are just something else. And people have been feeling that on the street when MPs have been going for election. They had council elections here in early May. This was a pivotal test, and they lost hundreds of local government councillors.
Labour has suffered huge losses after millions of people went to the polls in England, Wales.
And just look at the Labour Party. So Labour down all the way to there.
A Labour horror show got worse overnight and today. Now down almost 40 councils in England, obliterated in Wales and squeezed in Scotland. But the Prime Minister says
that election became a protest vote against Keir Starmer, and he hasn't been able to recover.
And so tell us, why was his polling so bad? Was much of that to do with the scandals that he faced? Among them, there was, of course, the link to the Epstein files. You can tell us about that. What was it?
He certainly lost a lot of ground because of that appointment of Peter Mandelson, an old Labor insider who was a mate of Jeffrey Epstein. And they knew he was a mate of Jeffrey Epstein, but they appointed Mandelson to be the ambassador to Washington, D.C. They thought that they would send a snake to deal with Donald Trump. And that rebounded on Keir Starmer. What really happened with that was months and months of negative media for Starmer when he was already unpopular.
Because he was warned by his officials. He was warned by his advisors. He was warned by other people. He was warned in the checking process. He didn't do the vetting because he didn't care what the vetting said. He'd made his decision to appoint Peter Mandelson, and now he's blaming someone else.
And it just bashed them around, and they couldn't stay focused on what they were meant to be doing as a government. And so he looked even more out of touch to ordinary voters because he wasn't dealing with the things that really mattered to them, because he was so consumed with this Mandelson scandal.
And you mentioned just before that he wasn't a natural politician, Keir Starmer. He was famously wooden when he speaks. He's not known to be very charismatic, to say the very least. So I guess tell us about the man who's predicted to replace him. This is Andy Burnham, because I believe many think he's the opposite. But he was sworn in as an MP, which is a requirement in Britain. Only a member of parliament can become prime minister. And this happened only hours after Keir Starmer announced his resignation. I mean, that's pretty amazing, yes?
This is why I'm thinking Andy Burnham has the makings of a very interesting prime minister. But I'm not on the Burnham bandwagon, you might say, because I'm not convinced that it's all going to work. I've seen so many spills. 20 years in Canberra, I saw this time and time again. You get enthusiastic. You see this media enthusiasm for a new Prime Minister. A couple of months later, the public turns against them and they start making mistakes. So I don't think that he's, the Messiah. We'll get to that later. He's got a good joke about that. But he does have something going for him. He's a straight talker. He's a good communicator. He's from the North and Labor needs to win the North. When he won his seat of Makerfield last week, he defeated Reform UK, the big right-wing party led by Nigel Farage. That is leading in the polls. So he looks to Labor like he is their answer. He can fight the right and win. What else do we know about him? I mean, he was a minister in Westminster. He became the mayor of Greater Manchester. There's nothing there that tells you he can lead a country of the size of Great Britain. But Labor's decided that he's their guy. He's a middle-class kid from the North. He went to Cambridge University. He studied English literature. He has said to people, and they've reported it, they believe it, he's read every Shakespeare play. He's a reader of poetry and he likes Philip Larkin. This is not somebody who is sort of a working class kid from the North in the old style of Labor. However, he's got the Labor Parliamentary Party right behind him now.
Interesting, though, because he did run twice for the leadership of the Labour Party in 2010 and 2015 and lost quite badly each time. That's a bit of an interesting backstory, I think. And I think he wants a high tax, high spend economy, right? He wants to tax the rich and fund social housing. Are those amongst his sort of cornerstone policy proposals?
That's where he's been over time. And I think that that's part of his appeal within Labor. Now, they won the 2024 election by telling people that they would be centrists and that they had an economic manifesto, that it was going to, deliver growth. A lot of the MPs who were elected are of the left. They're naturally drawn to Andy Burnham because he has this history of being fairly leftist with his views. But I don't think he's going to be able to do that. I mean, they've got huge constraints on them in government. They have got a debt of £2.8 trillion. It's heading to £3 trillion. The bond markets are jittery about the government's lending. So he cannot come in and say, welfare payments, we'll increase those. Or taxes on the rich, here they go, let's let rip. There are going to be a lot of constraints on how he gets things done. And I think that's going to disappoint people on the left because that is inevitable. We see that time and time again when something like this happens. People on the left think they've got a champion, a hero, and then they're disappointed because not all things are achievable. That, I think, is going to be the Andy Burnham story.
After the break.
And that's why they're shifting to Farage, and that's why Labor has had a terrible time trying to come up with an answer.
Okay, well, this brings us very neatly to the next question, which is then why Andy Burnham? You wrote that Labour, in its desperation, have turned to an outsider. So tell us, I guess, a bit more about what's happening in UK politics right now that they are very likely to choose this man as the next leader of the Labour Party and therefore the Prime Minister.
Yes, by the way, we should really be cautious and say they're very likely to choose him. But at the moment, there is no challenger to him. Starmer has announced he's going. Andy Burnham has put up his hand. One of the other challengers who might have put up his hand, Wes Streeting, former Health Secretary, has decided not to enter the race and is backing Burnham and is probably going to get a cabinet ministry. I think he would be a very natural choice as Chancellor of the Exchequer, but let's see how that goes. So Andy Burnham is, at the moment, the only contender, but it's still not going to be done and dusted until July and August. I think what he has, and what a lot of people say he's got, is that he's authentic. And in current British politics, voters have turned against people because they've been so disappointed with their leaders. And so if Labor has a chance with a more authentic leader to win those people back, well, it's really their last chance. The election's not till 2029. And they've got a big majority, so they can see that out unless there's a major crisis. But they really need to lift their game, and that's why they're turning to this authentic leader from the north to try and reconnect with ordinary voters. But let's face it, the last 10 years, 6 prime ministers already. They're now having their 7th prime minister in 10 years, and that's the 10 years since the Brexit vote. Now, I don't think it's all about Brexit, but I do think that Brexit has shaped British politics as we see it today. And one of the big things, whether you are for it or against it, one of the big things that I think is undeniable is that it did not deliver this great future that was talked about in 2016 when people went to the referendum. It didn't deliver a lot of the things that people thought they were going to get when they chose Brexit by 52% to 48%. They were told the only way to curb migration is to break from the European Union. Boris Johnson told that. He became Prime Minister, and then after the pandemic, migration went through the roof. Now, whether you're for it or against it, you can see, that is basically a broken pledge to the British public. Get Brexit, we'll control migration. It didn't happen. I call it the betrayal of Brexit. Now, I don't think that Andy Burnham's got a solution yet to that problem, but these things are what are driving the shift to the right, the shift to Nigel Farage and to reform. Farage was pro-Brexit. Brexit hasn't delivered, but that hasn't hurt Farage in a funny kind of way because he is blaming the implementation of Brexit, saying Boris Johnson got it wrong. It's all Boris Johnson's fault. Choose me and I'll fix it. I really will fix it. And I think we shouldn't sort of dance around this topic. We shouldn't overanalyze it in a way. A lot of the British public want migration controlled. They don't see it being controlled in the way they want, and they're looking for other people to do it. And that's why they're shifting to Farage, and that's why Labor has had a terrible time trying to come up with an answer.
Which is a really interesting backdrop for what Andy Burnham will have to face if he does, as we do expect, take the job as Prime Minister. And there's other challenges he's got, right? Because whoever takes over from Starmer is going to need to confront the ongoing war in Ukraine, instability in the Middle East, a rising China, and a US that is pulling back from decades-long commitments to Europe and to NATO. So what's the feeling on the ground there where you are in London? Like, is Andy Burnham up to that task?
I think it's a huge question mark, and I don't think he's proven he's up to that task. Keir Starmer was getting net migration down, but was not able to stop boats coming across the English Channel. 1,000 people came on boats last week. So that's a major challenge, and we don't see that Andy Burnham has got a different answer to that. There's a growth challenge, there's a housing challenge, there's a tax challenge, there's a huge budget challenge because they're in deficit. We haven't heard yet from Andy Burnham what he would do to answer any of those. He does talk a lot about housing, and that's a natural thing for him to focus on. It's important for the left of Labor, but it's also something that's so important for everyday people because of the cost of housing in this country. But he hasn't even needed to flesh out an agenda as an alternative leader. And that, I think, is an interesting thing about why he's so good as a politician. The media has done a lot of this for him, chipped away at Keir Starmer. There's been a solid group of Burnham advocates for the last year talking to the media, talking him up and talking Starmer down. And now we see the results. He is an incredibly sharp political operator. What we don't know about him is whether he's got a policy agenda that's going to fix Britain.
I mean, it is quite astonishing. And as you've mentioned, assuming he does get the job, he will be the 7th Prime Minister in 10 years. I mean, that's even worse than our Gillard-Rudd era years when there was 5 PMs in 10 years here. And I've seen some analysis that suggests that this rotation of prime ministers in the UK is actually likely to continue no matter what Andy Burnham sort of puts forward. Because as you mentioned with Brexit, 10 years ago, British prime ministers, I've read, they entered the job with hope, but then this mixture of continued poor economic growth, political chaos just undoes them. So what's your feeling, Crowe? What's the feeling in Britain there about Andy Burnham, that he'll similarly be churned out, or is he going to be the stayer?
I don't know whether he'll be the stayer. I think it's impossible to tell at this point. I mean, I've read some very flowery profiles of him in the British media. So I think he's obviously got a part of the British media behind him. But that doesn't last. That's only because he's the non-Starmer candidate, and everybody wanted to tear down Starmer, and he was the way to do it. It won't last. The only way it's going to change here is if they do what Australia did. I've been saying to people here, if you want to improve your political performance, get your MPs on a plane to Australia and figure out how Australia stopped the leadership spill cycle. There are some core lessons that they've got to learn. They need a political leader who is cautious and cunning. Starmer was cautious, he wasn't cunning. He did not have political smarts. I think Andy Burnham has the signs of having that cunning way of working. I think Anthony Albanese has that caution and cunning. I think that he has basically brought stability to the government. But he's only been able to do that because he's had stable cabinet ministers who haven't panicked, and he has had a caucus that's been disciplined. And clearly in the UK, they don't have those factors either. They've got cabinet ministers who whinge and whine about their prime minister to the media to talk themselves up, therefore talking the whole government down. That's incessant in the UK. They also have panicky MPs in Parliament who are relatively new, and they're the party of government, and they don't know how to do it. The way you do it is to hold your nerve and to be disciplined and to support strong government policy, even when it's tough. They were not able to do that. What's happened on Monday is damning of Labor in the UK.
Every decision I've taken has been about putting the country I love first. That is why I will resign as leader of the Labour Party.
That's an emotional Sir Keir Starmer announcing his resignation as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. But why is he going?
If they don't learn that it's a reflection on all of them, not just on Keir Starmer, they won't be any better. So let's see. If they can learn those lessons, then they'll break the cycle in the way that Australia broke the cycle.
And Crowe, just to wrap up then, I guess, are there any takeaways here for our own politicians? And I wonder, are they perhaps looking on nervously, given our entwined relationship with Britain, in particular over AUKUS?
I think that Burnham will support AUKUS, and I think that it's so important to both countries that it's essential to support it. I know that there are a lot of critics of AUKUS. People think it's not going to deliver. I think there are huge question marks about whether it can deliver. But at the moment, the UK absolutely needs a new fleet of attack submarines. They've got to control their northern waters from Russia. So they need the new design that they're sharing with us. We need it also. There is a joint interest in getting it done. Even a left-wing leader like Andy Burnham will know that.
Well, thank you so much, David, for your time.
It's great to talk.
In other news today, a new party of teal independence is poised to be announced to counter the rise of One Nation. Labour will water down some of its National Disability Insurance Scheme proposals in exchange for support from the Greens for the government's tax overhaul. And Australian-Palestinian academic Randa Abdel Fattah's book Discipline has been shortlisted for the prestigious Miles Franklin Literary Award. You can read more at theage.com.au or smh.com.au. Today's episode was produced by Chi Wong. Our executive producer is Tammy Mills, and our podcasts are overseen by Lisa Muxworthy and Tom McKendrick. If you like our show, follow The Morning Edition and leave a review for us on Apple or Spotify. Thanks for listening.